another edition of the Vine Resources podcast show. I'm absolutely delighted to have with me today Yehuda Hofri. Yehuda is the Chief Product and Technology Officer for Harver. Yehuda, thank you so much for being on the line.
Thank you for having me, David. Hi.
Thank you very much. Yehuda, I'm so excited to hear about the business. I stumbled across your business a little while ago, and I was really delighted when you accepted my request to be on the show. For those who don't know Harver and yourself, Yehuda, can you just give us a quick insight into your organization?
Right. So Harver is active for 3 years now, headquartered in Amsterdam, Netherlands. And what we're doing is we're enabling businesses with a digital set of assessment tools and preselection tools so that one would be enabled by digitalized assessment journeys for the candidates, and B, would earn a data-driven approach to how you would hire into your organization derived from the competencies, the actual competencies that your candidates would need to join, thrive, and stay with your organization.
Just tell us a little bit about your office setup at the moment. You've got 70 people in the organization, is that right, roughly?
Correct. Yeah.
And you're based out of Amsterdam?
Right, yeah. We're based out of Amsterdam. We've got a front office in New York, and we're employing R&D across Amsterdam, Sri Lanka, Israel, and the Ukraine.
And is there a typical customer that you're seeing in your business right now? Who are you seeing that would get the most out of your product?
Right, so our customer base is mainly composed of enterprises and corporations. You would have Booking.com, Uber, Netflix, and other global players as customers, but we also have a significant part of mid-market customers, SME, within our base. So I would say the product fits any organization who suffers employee attrition. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to really matching candidates/employees into what you really need and making sure that employees would exceed, would perform at best, and would be retained easily, let's say, within the org.
Okay, Yehuda, thank you so much for that introduction. We're going to jump straight into the questions if that's okay. We'd love to hear, what does a typical day in the business look like for you?
Right. So to give you some context on why I joined Harver and what's the excitement all about, I need to shed some light about the problem we're solving here. And it goes like this, there's a huge discrepancy in the market right now. There's lack of standardization. When you look at the main professional networks these days, right, you've got Xing and LinkedIn and Angel CO and many others, and there you do not see kind of a factorized or a normalized approach to what a role is, what the matching title would be, and then what the actual competencies for that title would be, right? Mm-hmm. What's really needed? What is the track record needed of a guy to become a chief data officer, right? I'm always using this as a very tangible example, because if we're not nailing it, if the market isn't nailing it for this ultra experienced segment, then we surely are not doing it when we're talking about undergraduates in like the more redundant segments of industry. So I would say the following: there are like dozens of permutations of how a title would be rendered across industries, right? Let's say R&D team leader, R&D manager, development team leader, mobile team leader, server team leader, and then Node.js team leader as opposed to DevOps team leader, etc., etc. Mm-hmm. But what Harvard does and the data science we're employing shows the 80-20 apply here, meaning there is a set of common denominators of tasks, of duties. There is like a craft that's homogeneous to all these guys who run as a data officer, or all those guys who manage R&D teams. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, you would have extra, very focused technical competencies, right?
Yep.
But your culture fit, your intelligence, your personality, your multitasking abilities, your stamina for pressure, all of these are common denominators to succeeding and performing in such positions. And what we're trying to do is scoop out the common denominators to ensure that there is a higher match between a candidate and the vacancy. And that applies for the business, the industry that this vacancy dwells in, right? Mm-hmm. And then that all needs to comply with culture and geography, because that's non-convertible between geographies. So that's before you asking me about the day-to-day kind of work at Harvard. The problem is immense. Again, there's no standardization of what the role is, and then there's no set of benchmarks and dimensions and attributes to the person and his track record. And when you go on LinkedIn and you try to data mine for X data scientists or Y chief data officers in the Netherlands, let's say, they don't align. So the people came out of different track records and experiences and companies. Some would manage CRM, some would manage social or online, but there's no one track, and we're trying to solidify that the error margin for customers would diminish, and that their attrition would diminish, and their successful hiring increases. That's the goal.
That's fantastic. And of course, the benefit for that is the candidate should have a much better experience with that brand.
Absolutely.
Can you name a person who's you believe has had a tremendous impact on you as a leader? Perhaps someone who's been a mentor for you, and how that person impacted your life?
I would say surely Professor Scott Galloway of L2. He is, recognized as a global, as a Silicon Valley marketing guru. But for me, he's really a compass. He's really a guru in terms of analyzing and better understanding the market dynamics and knowing how to roadmap and strategize on where we should go.
That's lovely. And you've grown the company pretty rapidly to 70 full-time employees. I'm just curious, employee engagement is really critical and important in any business, no matter what the size is. What are you doing from the top of the organization to keep your employees engaged?
Right. I think any product company is a story about people, and thus any leadership within product companies should be a story of empathic leadership, mm-hmm. of engagement, empowerment, entitlement. We also heavily eat our own dog food, so to speak. So when you speak of HR tech, data science, right, one would ask, why is there a burnout? What is a burnout? And data-wise, when you go into analyzing the dimensions leading a person to burnout, you would see a lot concentrated around the sense of purpose, or in that case, the lack of sense of purpose, right? When you are deprived of that, you're not empowered enough to get there, right? And so I'm trying the whole time to get the people engaged, to really challenge them always with something they haven't done yet, right? So that you set them up to succeed, not to fail.
Fantastic. Right? From your customer network or just in the day-to-day talk, what are you seeing as the biggest challenge facing leaders in organizations today?
I think the digital journey and the data journey, which is already passé, it has started. Whomever is not on that bandwagon is the Nokias, the Blackberries, the HP, the IBMs, they're out. And businesses which don't disrupt, that's a cliche already. They get disrupted and just fall. And I would say a challenge is when you speak to businesses which are at the start or pre that trajectory, you need to educate a lot. You need to really explain why they have to mass customize their value proposition, why they have to go through digitalization and enhanced, in this case, candidate, but it will be customer journeys, because the guys who are setting the bar nowadays are the four horsemen of the apocalypse, right? The Amazon, the Google, the Facebook, the Apple, and they're setting the bar that high in terms of user experience and engagement that when you have a market cap and you have 3.5 billion mobile users, right, mm-hmm. using those platforms, then that's kind of the bar we need to comply with, and our customers need to comply with. And if a candidate nowadays, the conversion cross-analysis between the quick apply at LinkedIn to the old cyclical manual fill in your 1,000 attributes in this form, then of course most candidates would drop when they need to fill in those infinite forms, right? And then you need to enlighten, you need to entice the customer with recognizing that there is a problem here and that they need to digitalize to get that talent in.
I'm just curious, many organizations out there, are having record profits. Big organizations are doing very successful. Yet, however, they have a terrible experience for their candidates, many with legacy systems. If you go onto their websites and you act as a candidate and you take it through, why aren't they doing something about it? Why aren't they taking it seriously? Or why don't they have the will or the right people in the organization to take notice and actually make a huge investment in that?
I do think they are taking this very seriously. But I think that as in any industry, when you look even at the most advanced, most digital internet companies, right? The HR office, the cubicle, is probably the last place where you would have data scientists. And again, this is out of experience, even at the most ridiculously progressed digital companies. You would see data scientists employed by the CFO, right? Mm-hmm. Way before they get into the HR office. And that takes time, of course, to change. And since this is a people-to-people kind of business, you still need the face-to-face. You still need the touch. You need to understand who's that person sitting across the desk from me. We would like to believe that as human beings, we better assess candidates than machine learning does. And I try to kind of explain to those people why, to the extent of, let's say, 90%, that's not true anymore. There's a lot that machinery can do better than us, unfortunately, but it is what it is. So I think they're trying a lot, they're doing a lot, and I see tons of this going. There's a couple of dozen of good AI companies around HR tech right now. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks for answering that. And how do you help a new employee understand the culture in your organization?
Of course, we start by really marinating the guys with why are we doing what we're doing, purpose, right? We're solving a genuine problem here. We've spoken, I gave you as an example that discrepancy, that non-standardization. Everybody assumed, everybody hoped a decade ago that LinkedIn is going to fix all our problems. Well, they haven't, right? We still have numerous different acronyms and names for the same title, and there's no one shopping list for the competencies, and there's no standardization for the salary that person who owns those competencies would earn. But I haven't arrived at giving you another example, which would be the ethics of hiring, right? Mm-hmm. And part of the mission we have is also not only creating the AI recruiter enablement for companies, but also granting them with ethics. So recently our CEO, Baron Graff, was interviewed by a TV news channel here in Amsterdam. And he gave them our data analysis of ethics in recruitment. And what we've done is crunched the way we assess candidates and the derived preselection. But then we segmented it by kind of cultures. Mm-hmm. And we saw that there's a lot of bias. Mm-hmm. Let me put it gently. We saw that when candidates arrive of a minority group within society, even though they scored much higher than the kind of general public, mm-hmm. they would be more prone to be rejected. And that's worrisome. That's terrible, right? And part of the value proposition, part of what we want to bring to the world is ethical hiring. In internet companies, the way they tender when they run an RFP, right? Mm-hmm. They would do it in a clean manner, meaning they would scrub out PII. They would scrub out any ethnicity, any race, anything that can turn the discussion into a biased one. Yep. We need to judge. When you want to hire the best CTO in town, you cannot disqualify the guy because he's this or that. You want just the best guy, right? And that's another point that, at least internally at Harver, we spend a lot of time focusing on. how does machine learning, how does data science enable us to help the businesses, but truly help them? Because there is bias. Yeah.
Do you know what? You've made some great points there, and I was just at a conference last week for the recruitment industry talking about blind CVs, for example. But you know what you're talking about is a completely another level, and I think many organisations will be really interested in finding out more about what you're doing there. What's the one mistake you witness leaders making more frequently than others, in your humble opinion?
Oh, that's a biggie. I think is assuming stuff and going in a non-data driven manner.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of organizations are on this trajectory we've just discussed, the data journey, right? Becoming an information-centric organization. Yet still, the more powerful one is, the more prone he is to make decisions based on his gut feeling. And again, I gave you some examples when we discussed Nokia and BlackBerry. If you'd ask my humble opinion, I would say that I would bet that was the point that failed them. They just assumed something. I'm not looking into market dynamics. I'm not going to refine or crunch insights about my consumers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make a decision that smartphone needs to have a keyboard in 2017, and that's going to well convert, right?
How do you see your industry changing in the next few years, and how even will that affect your ability to attract and hire the best talent?
So I see the industry changing as any other industry. We used to go, a decade ago, we used to procure flight tickets and movies in a shop.
Yeah.
We don't do that anymore. And I see HR moving in the same direction. Each one of us, we swap, right? For now, I'm a hiring manager, and maybe in a certain point in time, I'll be a candidate. I'll be applying for a vacancy, right?
Yeah.
But then in a couple of years, each one of us will have an online scorecard, right? That's me. And that's my set of competencies as acknowledged by Harver in this case, right? That's my personality score. That is my intelligence score, et cetera, et cetera. And going out to market with that kind of public scorecard, with platforms which can better retarget me to match against vacancies within certain verticals and industries, would make my life much easier, because there are crafts, there's things that I love doing and I'm good at. There's things that I maybe I dislike doing, but I'm great at. And that kind of mapping of the spectrum of what you like doing intersected with what you're great at doing, and how you would be able to really impact the business, the company, your job. Mm-hmm. That's something a lot of people either unaware of, or they're on a journey to get there, to realize, who am I, what am I good at, what would bring back satisfaction to me, right? The front limb, kind of our perception of ourselves and how we can do better. So that's the way I see the industry going to, where machinery will tell us, guys, this is what you should be doing. And if you take that course or that path of career, then you'll get to that position. Who do you want to be in 5 years? I want to be the CEO of Cisco. Okay, got it. This is the path you need to take, and that extra education and training you need to take in effort to get there. So that's consumer. And for business, really helping them target the right guys. The job boards, the LinkedIn's, all these guys right now, they flood the business with, okay, you needed a JavaScript developer. Here's like a data set of 20,000 guys. What is the match score? What is the nominal match between that person and the vacancy? I don't think that it's beyond 50%.
Final question: if you had your time again, and if you had your time again and you were giving your 20-year self advice, what one thing would you say to yourself?
I think I would go even more aggressive on bootstrapping startups and A/B testing and trying this to extent, to just maximize on this. I enjoy this roller coaster, and I probably would have advised myself to be even more ruthless and aggressive, and yeah.
Great, great. That is great advice. Yehuda, thank you so much for being on the show. It's really insightful. There's so many great things that you've shared with us. So thank you so much. What's the best way of people reaching out to you? LinkedIn or other similar tools? What's the best way of people getting in touch with you if they want to connect with you?
Right. Email, LinkedIn, Twitter. Yeah, I can drop you my corporate email and you can share it.
I'll get all that information in the show. Look, thanks again so much for joining us. Enjoy your weekend in the Netherlands or wherever you're off to, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks so much, David. Thank you. Enjoy it.